over the best practices. Here we have a list of a variety of websites and applications that you are able to use to implement our low stakes to high stakes framework. We have applications such as utilizing Zoom's own capabilities of polls, breakout rooms, and reactions that can create a form of engagement via a virtual reality. I know someone at a different school, I believe it was Sacramento State, who created a amongst us type of game using Zoom pool features. So that was really cool. Mentimeter, which we just did right now. We also have Flipgrid, which is a website that allows participants to upload a short 1 minute to 2 minute recording videos they can use to share about themselves or even create a topic where participants can respond to each other. That is a fan favorite of one of our professors. Makes us do a Flipgrid video to get to know each other before class for us. And then there's Kahoot, which people can use to transform their content or classroom into interactive games that create a competitive environment where people can track their progress via a nickname they use once they log in. And Kahoot also has a very awesome soundtrack too, so definitely consider checking out Kahoot to have a mix up in your engagement. And we also want to remind everyone that these same applications that we use for our current virtual reality can also be used once we go back in person at work and school. Let us stay in the spirit of experimentation and keep experimenting with new tools and equipment that create engagement. We also want you to be able to gauge the level of engagement by noticing if there's enough rapport built to move on from low stakes to mid stakes and finally high stakes. A reminder, definitely you just don't want to jump into one stakes before you want to kind of just you gradually build onto that. And we also encourage having a co-facilitator, not only for support, but to also to build and cultivate your colleagues or students' facilitation skills. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Efren. So I'll talk about our final set of best practices, and this is about keeping race, equity, and trauma in mind. So these are some questions to be thinking both in the front of your mind when you're planning this out and you're planning out what activities should we put in, but also during your actual facilitation of the environment to, really keep mind equity, race, and trauma as we're thinking about how we're facilitating and how our students and participants are engaging in our environments. One thing to really ask yourself before you start even designing the workshop is like, who is in the room? Who are going to be the demographics? What are they going to be? Staff? Are they going to be faculty? Are they going to be students? Are they going to be first generation students? Are they going to be first year students entering college for the first time in their lives? Are they going to be students of color? Are they going to be students from a specific student organization? Knowing who you're going to be facilitating to is going to be really key in designing your workshop or your environment with intentionality and care. We also encourage when you're actually facilitating your actual workshop to keep in mind who is speaking the most in the room right now. If you're trying to have a dialogue with multiple students and your whole class, like who is speaking the most? Has airtime been shared equitably? Or is one person kind of hogging the mic? We said one mic, we had the one mic rule, so it's one person speaks at a time, but is one person hogging the mic constantly? And if that's something to think about. Are there a lot of people who haven't chimed in at all? Maybe the room is really, really quiet with the exception for a few people. If so, how can you intervene as a facilitator to encourage other people to speak up? Maybe they did, but they are just a little shy. Or how can you ask others who have been already sharing a lot to share the mic at this point? So that's something to keep in mind as you're facilitating. Since we're virtual, technology is really key. So a question to ask yourself before you facilitate is, does everybody need access to a computer for this environment? Or is this something that you can call into and that would be sufficient? Do you need a webcam? So for example, today when we were doing our mid-stakes activity example, it was helpful if you have a webcam so that you can show us your object, but also offering a different option in case a student doesn't have a webcam. So for example, if you want to share what your object is, but you can't, maybe you don't have a webcam or you can't turn it on, like put your object in the chat and you can still engage with us that way and let us know what you have. And if you are requiring a webcam or a computer, how can you ensure that people have access to that technology? And that's a key question to ask as you start planning out your session. Are you going to have people pick it up? Are you going to mail it to them? Those are questions to ask if you're going to be an educator in this space. The fourth thing we ask that you keep in mind is to be conscious of physical behavioral cues, postures, facial expressions, if you're able to have cameras on, or for those students who do have their cameras on, being really mindful of that is really helpful. And we do acknowledge that this is that time when cameras on is really helpful, even though we hesitate to require it. When you have cameras on and you can see people's faces, it's much easier to read, if something is not sitting right with them, if something is really boring them and you got to move on to the next thing, that's really helpful to see. And so we're excited for when we're back in person, because then we can actually read those visual cues from our students. And then on that note, keeping trauma in mind means that you're always able to give students an out if needed. So for example, some students, when they're sharing something that may be really traumatic to them or associated with a really hurtful memory, sometimes you have to let students, skip their turn. Maybe they're not ready to share at this moment, or letting them keep their cameras off. That added barrier of not having to share their facial expressions could be a form of safety. Allowing them to share via the chat versus the mic. As a facilitator, we always want to give students and our participants an option to opt out or opt in a different way. So for example, when we were doing that mid-stakes activity, if you don't want to share your object, if you don't like sharing your background or your space, or maybe you're outside doing errands, but you still want to engage, a way to do that is just letting your participants know, hey, if you prefer participating through the chat, here's an option. Just write down what your object is in the chat. So giving people the option to participate in alternative ways is really important for keeping trauma in mind. I'm actually gonna skip the takeaways just so we can have a little bit more time for Q&A. Does that sound okay, Efren?
Yes, A-okay for me.
Okay, so actually we'll just jump right into our conclusion, because we're reaching the last 5 minutes or so of our day today.
Thank you, Connie. Yes. In conclusion, we want student affair practitioners to keep in mind that although our virtual reality may be temporary, think about how you can utilize the accessibility of virtual learning for your students and participants. Once we go back in person, be mindful of those who enjoyed a virtual reality and possibly record your workshops so those who aren't able to attend can watch whenever they can. Provide a live stream for your workshops so participants can watch and attend at the comfort of their own homes. And also, think about how you can translate the framework and best practices in person to be mindful of those students who feel most comfortable attending student services while being at home. This new virtual reality has brought new opportunities of engagement and interaction to the surface. So let us utilize the best features of our modern technology to our advantage and create a welcoming and supporting environment for our students.
Awesome. Thank you, Efren. And we wanted to share that we did, for ACPA, we created a handout that is a PDF that basically has a diagram of this in case you want to have a visual of it. And also it asks the key questions that we posed for you at the best practices section. So let me show you what it looks like. This is the actual handout. We'll drop the PDF in the chat in a bit. So it kind of goes over the framework. It asks some of the key questions that we posed during the best practices section. We'll send this, we'll put this in the chat, so you don't have to take notes on this or anything or try to screenshot it last minute. And then it also gives you space, so you could print it out or you can use a fillable PDF if that's what you prefer, and actually brainstorm, use this as a brainstorming tool to think like, what are the high stakes activities that I want to do? What are the mid stakes activities that I want to do? And what are the low stakes activities that I'm going to do today? So this is going to be a nice way to brainstorm and frame your sessions with intentionality. So I will put that in the chat shortly. But I don't want to be rushed for time, so please feel free to contact us if you have any questions, comments, feedback for us. But otherwise, I will open it up to Q&A for these last few minutes.
Any questions or comments?
If not, I think that's the end of our session. Our contact information is on the screen, and I will share in the chat both our PDF slide deck from today and also our PDF handout. So I'll put that in the chat really shortly. So thank you, everybody, for engaging with us today. It was really awesome because you all were a very engaging crowd. That really helped. So thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone here. Thank you so much. Y'all were so fun. Y'all passed the shoe game. Shoe game check.
Well, I want to say thank you, Connie and Efren, for taking this time to discuss strategies for engaging virtual environments. I know this is really an important topic as an educator serving students virtually, so hopefully you all took something useful away from this topic. We will stick around for any last minute questions, but again, thank you all for coming tonight. And do note that we do have another great speaker event next week, same time, same Zoom link. So we hope to see you then. Have a good night, everyone.